said, my name's John Iannarelli. I was second in command of the FBI here in Arizona for about a number of years, but in Arizona for 10 years, I've worked as an FBI agent. Starting back in the day, I was a police officer, went to law school, got my law degree, became a lawyer and practiced law for a while, then joined the FBI. Those professions give me the distinction of two separate things. One, I clearly went from one hated profession to another, but number two, every job I've had has required a degree of integrity. None of these jobs could be done without it. Now, in the FBI, for many, many years, I was in charge of the cyber program, all the computer hackings, businesses that could be attacked, such as your own businesses. We worked cases like Sony and the Target hack, which you all have heard of course. A little advice to the business people in the room: if you don't want your business attacked, don't name it Target. But other than that, however, working with cyber agents is a different world. If you've ever worked with cyber people, they can be a different breed. Now, they're very bright. I had people with their masters in computer science, doctorates in computer science, but they didn't necessarily have the social skills, if you will, that most people have that goes with the computer world. I like to describe myself as the only agent in the FBI that led other agents who have never kissed a girl. But I've left all that behind now, and I've recently retired from the FBI. I'm in the private sector, and I work primarily for the NFL. I handle security for the Arizona Cardinals on behalf of the NFL. I can't tell you what a relief it is to finally be in a profession that does not get negative publicity. So, with that, let's talk about integrity. And what I want to discuss is my experiences in the FBI, personally, firsthand, and how integrity played a role. So the first thing to understand is with the FBI, of course, it stands for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, but it's also our motto. It stands for fidelity, bravery, and the most important is integrity. Because you can have the first two, but without the third, it means nothing at all. So how does integrity play into cases and things that the FBI do? Well, you may all remember the Oklahoma City bombing. This was the first major terrorist attack on U.S. soil that was domestic terrorism. This was a significant case for the FBI. There were 168 people killed that day, thousands of victims. The FBI, of our 12,000 agents, we put 1,400 agents on this case alone, which I was one of them. From that, we worked over 3 years building this case and running down every single lead. There were 43,000 leads to be covered. We conducted 28,000 interviews, spent 1 million man-hours working this case, checked 1 billion records to make sure we had the right people and everyone was in custody. Now, with all that going on, it was very easy if you wanted to slip away in the shadows and take some time off or do whatever you want to do. It was too big of a case for any one individual to manage and supervise anyone else. However, doing the job with integrity is what supports teamwork. In your business, if you're going to have teamwork, integrity has to be a key component of that. In the FBI, every agent operates informants. They can be regular business persons, or they may be criminals looking to solve a problem they've caused for themselves. I throw this picture up here because I had an informant whose code name was Elvis. And he was not the young, attractive Elvis, I will tell you that. So, now Elvis was helping me with a case involving police corruption. In a department where there were many, many fine officers, there were a few that were taking advantage. They were responding to burglaries in the middle of the night, stores that had been robbed, and when they arrived first, they'd help themselves to what they found, and then later work with a pawn shop to sell the stolen merchandise that they took, yet would report as being missing from the store. Elvis was working for the pawn shop. His job was to meet with all these people. I wired him up with a recorder. He was going to get the evidence that we needed. He was going to get everything on tape. People were going to be arrested and sent to prison. It was a big operation. The day this was all coming down, I briefed Elvis. We had maybe 30 agents watching the operation because we were ready to move in. Meanwhile, I also had a transmitter on Elvis so I could hear everything going on in case we had to rush in and save him. So Elvis goes walking into the pawn shop. I hear him talking on the way there. And then once he gets in and says hello, it suddenly gets very quiet. and we don't hear anything for the remainder of the time he's in the store. And I'm thinking of all times for the equipment to fail, now the time. Well, Elvis comes out an hour later, and he comes up to me, and he's real happy and smiling and telling me how good it was. And I break the news. I say, I'm very sorry. Apparently, there's an equipment failure. We didn't hear anything at all. And Elvis tells me, well, we weren't talking. I'm like, what do you mean you weren't talking? And Elvis, who probably is not the brightest person around, he told me that when he got there, he realized maybe other people were listening as well. So he decided to write everything down and pass notes back and forth. I explained to Elvis I was listening, and you missed the whole point of what you were supposed to do. So, the entire day wasted. I wasted a time of 30 agents. Who's responsible for that? Elvis? No, it's not Elvis, it's me. The buck stopped. Oops. There you go, Elvis. I have to be responsible for what I say. The reality is, I knew what I was dealing with. I wasn't dealing with the sharpest tool in the shed. I should have been more explicit, right down to the detail of what I wanted this person to do. It was my words that caused that day and cost that case and wasted other people's times. I own that. That's what integrity is about. Kidnapping. We work a lot of kidnappings in the FBI. I had many kidnapping cases in my career. But there's one case in particular that I think is important to talk about when it comes to integrity. So when you transfer in the FBI, and I was a brand new agent sent to my first office, inevitably there's a more senior agent leaving and you're replacing that person. You get a bunch of cases, and we often refer to them as old dog cases. Cases that people have worked for years and never solved. But in the FBI, we don't close a case until there's a resolution. So I inherited a kidnapping case involving a 4-year-old girl that had been taken 9 years ago. So this case obviously hadn't been solved. There was very little likelihood that it would ever be solved. And the agent who had this case was just sending paper to the file on a monthly basis, saying that he was aware of the case, no new leads. Well, I inherit this case, and instead of just pushing it along, I decided I'm going to throw myself into it. I get this case featured on a relatively new show called America's Most Wanted. We use brand new computer technology, and I get age enhancement pictures. And I get this case advertised. I get a bunch of leads, and I run all these leads down. Lo and behold, one of these leads proved to be true. After 9 years, I was able to locate this child who was now 13 and still alive. And I was able to arrest the person that actually kidnapped her and reunite this child with her family. Hard work and persistence is about integrity. I could have just sent paper to the file like everybody else did and assumed this case is not going out anywhere, I have other things to do. But looking at this case, knowing what my integrity was and my responsibility to it, it paid off in the end. 9/11. Nobody needs to tell you about 9/11. We all remember that. What I will tell you is the day of 9/11, we were criminal investigators. Everyone joined the FBI to respond to crimes, find the bad guys, and arrest them and bring them to justice. 9/11 changed the FBI forever. Now, suddenly we've been told our job is to find crimes before they occur. Find out who terrorists are before they commit acts of terrorism. We are now intelligence agents instead of criminal agents. That's not what I joined the FBI to do. That's not what any of the agents of the FBI joined the FBI to do. But integrity is embracing change. The country needed us to do something, and we responded to it. I'm proud to say that the FBI, as a result, there has not been a single successful terrorist attack in the United States since 9/11. And because we embrace change, that will continue. Congresswoman Giffords shooting. Saturday morning, I'm at my house. It's about 10 o'clock, a little after. I get a call from Washington, D.C. And I'm told there's a report of a congressman having been shot. I didn't know anything about this. I turn on the TV. I see the news reports. I jump in my Buick car, throwing on the clothes I was wearing the night before, and race down to Tucson, and literally lights and sirens. I'm in Tucson within an hour and a half on scene. Done a lot in my law enforcement career. I will tell you this was one of the most dramatic looking scenes I've ever seen. Victims still out on the sidewalk because they were clearly deceased and evidence was being gathered. Only one victim had been transported from the scene. Scene was clearly secure with multiple law enforcement agencies and agents on the scene, so I went to our command post at the FBI office in Tucson. I worked through the day there and into the night, coordinating all the leads that had to be run down. Was there another shooter? Was there other people involved? Was this a conspiracy, perhaps domestic terrorism or international? Until we know those things, no one was going to stop and rest. That race down to Tucson turned into my being down there for 11 days with pretty much the clothes on my back. I was one of hundreds of people from the FBI who responded from around the country to help, and the agents here in Phoenix all going down there to work this case. No one let up. We spent 11 solid days, but there were many times that I wanted to go back and catch some sleep at my hotel room and things like that, or just take some time off, yet I was asking everybody else to do so much. There was so much work to be done and so few people to do it in the big picture. There was one time that we needed to go to the hospital where a victim was having surgery, and someone needed to go into the surgical room and collect the bullet as evidence to maintain that chain of custody. And with no one else around to do it, I went down there, grabbing a young agent, and went in myself and collected that. Me, the boss, but yet I'm doing the things that the street agent would do. Because integrity was also leading by example. I wanted people to see that I'm not going to make you do anything that I won't do myself. In sum, this is the case that I think brings it all together. It's an identity theft case, but it shows you a couple of things, that what you can do if you apply yourself, and maybe the moral of the story is sometimes God wants people to go to prison. So, I'm in the middle of my career, second office. I'm following up on a bank robbery that had happened days before, just going back to confirm interviews and facts. I'm talking to the assistant manager when the manager comes running over and says, "Sir, there's somebody in line in the bank trying to pass a rather large bad check at this moment." So I go over, I talk to the individual, I detain him, get his story, and quickly realize he's going to be taken into custody by me. So how did I know, and how did this guy get caught? This thief was going around town stealing mail out of mailboxes looking for checks. Don't put your mail in your mailbox waiting for the postman to pick it up. Thieves do that every day. So he finds a check, it's a utility check, and he takes that check and takes some acetone. Acetone will take the ink off the paper and yet not damage the paper. He rewrote that check to himself, made it for a large amount. It was a check drawn from a large bank branch, and he went around the city picking a branch at random so he could walk in and get the check cashed immediately. He walks in, he gets online, gets called up to a teller window at random. It happened to be the teller's check that he stole. Now, aside from the fact he clearly needs another profession, when you look at what are the odds that he would steal a check at random, pick a bank at random, get online at random, and go up to a random teller, and there's an FBI agent standing in the bank at that moment. Integrity, me being there and doing my job, prepared me for this opportunity. Everything I've done in my 20-some-odd years in law enforcement and before has been about integrity. I would not be standing up here today had I not conducted my work such. Everything I've done in the FBI applies to the business sector. All of you here today are models for integrity by the mere fact you're sitting here today. After today, I hope we can all go out and continue to carry the message so that others will try to emulate what you all are doing and which we have shown is the key to success. Thank you for your time. Have a great day. I started off my career in the police department, became an attorney, joined the FBI. So other than the obvious, I've gone from one hated profession to another. I have the experience, however, in talking about the active shooter because I've been there for quite a bit. and seen, responded to a number of active shootings, including Gabby Giffords. As an aside now, I go out and I teach and I do these. My other major client is the NFL. And so on any given Sunday, I'm somewhere in the country at a football game during football season, heading down to Atlanta for Super Bowl. You heard him say that I did 9/11, Oklahoma City bombing, all these major events. Now with the NFL, on a Sunday, I am the guy checking the air pressure in footballs to make sure they're properly inflated. I swear, that's true. So I call it the Patriot Act. And and the NFL has filed a restraining order to tell me to stop calling it the Patriot Act. But with that, let's talk a little bit about the active shooter. So the working definition, it's somebody who's actively engaged in trying to hurt or kill people, mostly with a gun, but can it be with another sort of device in doing that? It often is over before law enforcement arrives. So it's one of the things I want you to take from today. It's not just about keeping yourself safe. It's understanding that whatever happens, you're going to have to be prepared because it's going to be over before somebody gets there to help you out otherwise. This is not a new problem. We've had a lot of active shootings in the United States over the years. The last 10 years alone, we've had over 160 active shootings. We've had over 500 people killed as a result of active shootings and thousands literally shot. So it's a problem that's going to continue to persist. It started, the first true active shooting, some people may recognize this, University of Texas, the Tower shooter back in '66, having taken action. Then we had McDonald's back in the 80s. This was actually in San Diego where I was a police officer, although before my time. Luby's Cafe was another famous active shooting because it started putting on the map where are we really safe? Because it's schools, it's restaurants. Columbine. Everybody remembers where they were during Columbine. This was a big one. We had not seen active shootings to this degree before in a school setting, and yet here we have it in Columbine, students trying to hurt other students. Then Virginia Tech. This one was an individual who was emotionally disturbed, as are many of the active shooters. He took a lot of time in preparation. He actually went around the doors and bolted them shut to prevent people from escaping. So that way, when they tried to get out of the building, they were trapped and couldn't escape. What they needed to know was how to hide in the event that you can't get away from the shooter. We're going to talk about that. The movie theater in Colorado, where all those people were injured during the showing of Batman. Sandy Hook Elementary. Now even our elementary kids are not safe anymore because the active shooter has no discretion. This is a case where people, they understood the run, hide, fight concept, which we're going to go into depth, but they didn't implement it properly. The 21 students or the 20 students that were killed and the teachers had actually secured themselves in a classroom, but they opened the door to take a look outside to see what was going on. And that's how the shooter was able to gain entry to that particular classroom and kill all those people. So we're going to talk about what you're actually supposed to do. The Pulse nightclub. Here we had a large number of persons that were shot. Shows up at this nightclub. He had staked it out, knew the exits, the entrances, etc. And he had a captive audience. There were very few ways to get out of this building. I will tell you, the FBI, when we responded to this, the way that we made entry to actually go after the shooter and neutralize the shooter, we had to put explosives on the side of the building where it was cinder block walls and punch a hole through the wall so that we could get into where the shooter was. So if it's that difficult, how are you supposed to get out if we can't even get in? And then this one last year, we all remember the shooting that happened in Florida. This individual shows up at the school on Valentine's Day. There were a lot of signs in advance, and it's easy to Monday morning quarterback, but first of all, the guy, his parents are dead. He's living with friends in a trailer home. He was suspended from school. Nobody thought about putting him in a charter school or something like that. They knew he had an interest in guns, so now you're taking a troubled kid with no parents, interest in guns, and giving him a lot of free time. Mistake number one. Mistake number two, and it's just being more aware of our surroundings, he takes an Uber to school with a rifle. Now, The Uber driver should have said, this is a clue, that the guy has a rifle and I'm dropping him off at the school, but the Uber driver didn't think anything of it. As we become more aware of these things, that would be a sign, number one, I'm going to drop him a block from the school and call 911, as opposed to escorting them right up on the desk to the steps of the school. Once in the school, he had a plan. He was going to go in the school, go upstairs, start shooting, and then fire out the windows as everybody escapes the school. The school in Florida has hurricane-proof windows. He tried to shoot through the windows, and he couldn't fire through the windows. That saved a lot of lives in that case. But he mingled with the students leaving the school, and he just was in the crowd. The police didn't know who was the bad guy, which we're going to talk about, how you let the police know you're not the bad guy. And he was captured about an hour later. Who knows who else he could have hurt in that time because he got away. As you can see from this map, there's a lot of them. Now, 2017 is the most recent statistics we have. But you can see that we had 346 mass shootings in various parts of the country. A mass shooting is 3 or more, but it means it's not a domestic violence. It's not somebody who knows all his victims, etc. So what you take away from this today, it's not just to keep yourself and the students safe, but what you can do in the future to keep yourself safe. Maybe you'll be at the movie theaters with, God forbid, something happens. You want to be able to know how to respond in that sort of situation. Also, there's a financial cost. We never really talk about it, but when you look at what happened in Parkland, Florida, it's going to be very expensive. The typical shooting, a jury is going to award a judgment, and they're always going to sue the companies or the schools with the money. So here, the average person that's killed, the family will receive a little over $4 million. Victims who are wounded but not killed will get close to $200,000. Parkland, we had 14 people killed. You're talking some serious money is going to come out of that school district. That's not going to be money for future schools, students, books, education, etc. It's going to be paying jury awards. Now, what I'm going to focus on today is I'm going to talk about the shooting at Las Vegas. And the reason I'm going to do this is I had the misfortune, I like to say. I showed up in Las Vegas about an hour before the shooting. And I was supposed to give a presentation the next day to a group of law enforcement officers, none of whom showed up because they were all working this shooting. But I was actually on the phone with a friend of mine, a cop, who was at the concert. She and her husband were going to come listen to me speak the next morning. So I'm shouting into the phone over the music, talking to them about where to find me, where to meet with me. And while I'm on the phone, shots rang out. And she goes into cop mode and she says, hey, we're taking rounds, call 911. They're going to seek cover, which is what they did. And they survived as a result of knowing what to do. But let me walk you through this shooting, and then we're going to talk about some of the things that went well and some things that didn't go so well. So it was the Jason Aldean concert. It was about 9:45 that night, and he was going to take the stage for about 30 minutes, and he just goes on stage and starts playing. For those of you who have been to Vegas, I'm sure most of you have, you can kind of see where it is, Mandalay Bay. It's just down the road from the big pyramid, the Luxor Towers. And the Harvest Festival was right across the street. 22,000 people inside the Harvest Festival. All right, it's 1 minute to 10. A security guard is walking down the hallway. He got a notification that a door was not shut. It wasn't the shooter's door. It was another hotel room. But this guy was looking out the door, and he sees security coming, so he assumes security's coming for me. So he opens fire down the hallway and shoots the security guard in the leg. Security guard crawls to a place where he can take cover, gets on his radio and calls it in. The adrenaline is pumping so much, he fails to mention that he's been shot. Now, think about that. Again, when you're faced with this situation, the adrenaline kicks in. Are you going to be able to think clearly, and how are you going to respond? He never really thought about a situation like this. He put out that somebody has a gun and was firing shots, which is important, but it didn't have the urgency that I've been shot, he's actually shooting people. And this is about 5 minutes before he actually starts shooting at the crowd. So time's being wasted here. I have this picture of this food cart up here because what the shooter did was he came prepared. He put 2 surveillance cameras on this cart, pointing down opposite ends of the hallway. And using his cell phone inside his hotel room, he's monitoring the cell phone cameras, like the Ring cameras. And he can see what's going on. That's how he saw the security guard. That's how he was monitoring the police as they were responding to the room as well. So they knew everything that was going on. He knew what was going on outside in the hallway. The question is, in your classrooms, etc., are you able to look out in the hallway to see what's going on so that you can see where a shooter is? If you're in a bathroom, is there a peephole so you can look outside through the peephole if you had to secure yourself in a bathroom? Just things to think about, not necessarily just here when you go to hotels or any sort of public event. All right, 5 minutes after, he starts shooting at the crowd. And he's basically spraying the crowd of 22,000 people down below. This guy fired in volleys of 50 rounds. He fired roughly 11 different volleys and, 12 volleys and about 1,100 rounds total in his entire shooting. More in the beginning, less towards the end. But it's shooting fish in a barrel. There's no place for people to run. The security company hadn't really thought about this. They have this giant pen set up to keep people in and not let people sneak into the concert. But how are you supposed to get out in an emergency situation? Again, when you go to these events or you're someplace, you want to know where the exits are. This is my first time in the auditorium. I know about the 2 exits behind you. I know about the one to the side. I've been backstage, and I kind of do that. It's how I'm wired to know where the exits are. So if somebody comes in this door, I know I don't have to get past him. I'm going elsewhere. Always take note of your surroundings. You want to have an exit plan if you need to get away. All right. It's 8 minutes later. What did I say in the beginning? It takes about 8 minutes for the police to figure out where the shooting is coming from and what to do. They figure out where the shooter is. How do they find out where the shooter is? Well, aside from the security guard calling things in and all, big hallway, lots of hotel rooms, this guy had thought about a lot of different things in planning the shooting. He built a platform so he could stand on the platform and fire down at the crowd. He had brought a sledgehammer to knock out the window to the hotel because the windows don't open. He did not think about the smoke detectors. And when he was firing the gun so much, it was putting off smoke. It set off the smoke detector. So hotel engineering was able to report in real time, we have a fire in this room. It didn't take long for us to put 2 and 2 together and figure out, it's not a fire. It's where the guy's firing his gun. So police know exactly what room he's in and where he's going to go to. So they're heading up to room 135. It's on the 32nd floor. You could see police coming through here with long guns and everybody in the casino putting their hands up because, again, we don't know who the bad person is. So we've got to treat everybody like a bad person. If you were to have something happen here, they're going to treat you the same way. So you want to cooperate with the police. This is the shot I took of the hallway the next day. And you could see the hallway, how narrow it is. All the rooms look alike, but look how far the rooms go down. It's a busy, active place. There's a lot of rooms to have to pick and choose from. 10:25, 15 minutes after the shooting, 20 minutes after the shooting begins, police put out a notification to the general public. Hey, there's an active shooter. Be aware of it. They're texting that out, putting it on social media, notifying cab drivers, don't pick up people in the area, etc. I'm in Vegas. I do work for Fox News Channel out of New York and D.C. They call me, and they ask me, hey, we're hearing about a shooting in Vegas. Do you know anything about it? And I tell them I could see it from my hotel window. I know exactly what's going on. So a lot of the stuff I have to show you today is from behind the scenes working for Fox. So I go on, and I'm talking about what's taking place, and I have FBI contacts in town. I'm getting info from them as well. This is a overview. You can see he's in the corner hotel room, breaks out the window on the 32nd floor. He's basically shooting straight down on the crowd. It's not an easy place to get to because we can only access him from outside the hallway and enter into his large hotel suite. The incident was declared over at 12:30. It took the police roughly 2.5 hours from the start to the time that they can go in. The subject had killed himself, so the police didn't have to take any action. But you can see it took 8 minutes to identify where he is. 2.5 hours to get to him. You've got to be able to protect yourself. You've got to know what to do so you can keep yourself safe. My friends who were cops, they got under a car to take cover. They were there for 2.5 hours until it was safe for them to be removed. Let's take a look at the next day, and you can see how long this goes on. So that's Monday morning. If you've been to Vegas, you can recognize it normally is not quiet like that. You can see everything's closed off. There was crime scene tape down the Vegas Strip as far as the eye can see. In the afternoon, still the same thing. And this went on for days. The sad part is there's still victims out. They have so many dead persons that it takes time. And they still had people on the sidewalks who had bled out trying to get away from the carnage. It was a long time before everybody can be removed and brought to the mortuary. So that afternoon, I'm showing you this. I'm out there for Fox. Look at the strip. I mean, there's nothing out there. It is dead quiet. There is not a car on the road. Everything is shut down. It is not business as usual. If something were to happen here, it's going to be not business as usual for quite a while. When I went to the Gabby Giffords shooting, it was a shopping mall. There was a Safeway and a bunch of other stores. We were shut down for 7 days. Nothing was taking place in there. So you have to think about, all right, classes, are they going to resume? Are students going to go elsewhere? How are you going to do your job? And how are things going to continue? But things will close down for a period of time. This is a look at the crime scene. You can see that it's really large. You can see the fences making it difficult for people to get out and exit quickly in an emergency. A little bit more of a close-up. What some of these investigators are doing, I use this picture because these guys are actually from Phoenix. They went out there. We brought in agents from all over. They're looking for shell casings. One of the conspiracy theories was, were there multiple shooters? They retrieved every shell casing they could find, and they accounted for virtually all of the shell casings to be able to show they were fired from the same weapon, same caliber, etc., so that there was no secondary weapons being used. There was just one weapon, one shooter. Here they're walking around with plastic bags. This is after they've collected evidence. This is like on day Wednesday. They're now looking for personal belongings to return them to people or the families of those that were killed. And that took a couple of days as well to do. This is a picture of the coroner's truck. I talked about the body before out on the sidewalk. Your typical coroner's office, like this town, for example, they may have one van that's made to move one or two persons at a time. We had 58 killed. So you could see they're literally, some of the bodies are stacked up here and they're putting them in refrigeration trucks to try to deal with the carnage. But think about some of this and dealing with this, plus the psychological effect on the people that have to be exposed to all this as doing this for a living. This is a list of the weapons the guy had. He brought in a lot of different weapons. Interestingly enough, he only used one gun. And let me show you the room, the layout there, where you can see the bottom, the hallway, the main entrance, and then he was shooting by the windows. This is inside of his room, and I point this out so he had stacks of magazines right there, fully loaded, ready to go, but he didn't use them, didn't use any other weapons, just the one weapon he was firing, which malfunctioned after a certain point. I'm going to talk about that in a second. Here you can see now the subject, he's lying on the floor, he took his own life. It's obviously been edited so you can't see anything, but these are all the shell casings that were on the floor from him shooting. And he wrote a note. So everybody was hoping when the note was found, is this a suicide note? Is it going to explain the motivation? This is part of his planning. He basically looked at where he was going, measured the distance, figured out the wind that night, and he was making mathematical notes of where he should sight in his rifle based on the windage, etc. So just like a hunter would do, he was taking the time to do all this. Very well thought out, planned action, as are most active shooters. They put in some thought to what they're going to do before they carry out the shooting. So, what do you do beforehand? Whether it's school, your work, both here obviously, or social, you want to be aware of your environment. You want to know where you are, where the exits are, and also the possible dangers. If you're in public, there's always a possible danger. Now, I'm not saying to be paranoid. I am not paranoid, but I'm mentally prepared. I know that I'm going to act in a certain way if a situation happens. You'll want to make a note of more than one exit. Like I talked about before, there's two behind me, there's one to the side, others in the back. It's good to know how to have a way to get out when you need to exit the building.